And
Dr. Monteith, I just want to make sure people don't misunderstand, because sometimes people are so uneducated they jump to conclusions with things like this. Your regular listeners know much better, but I just want to make sure people understand. By you saying these things, you're not trying to shill necessarily for the Democratic Party, right? You say it's all part of a much bigger problem in which they're both bound together, correct?
Well, both political parties are controlled by the same people. But we're not trying to win the war in Afghanistan. Why did we go into Afghanistan? We went there to catch Osama bin Laden. Why didn't we leave when we didn't catch him? Well, because, of course, we never went there to catch Osama bin Laden. We went there because they wanted a war, and the same thing was true with Iraq. And I fear the same thing will very soon be true with Iran. They're planning a war with Iran, and heaven help us. But, you see, people don't understand that Vietnam was a no-win war. We didn't go there to win. Certainly we have a little pamphlet we call the Communist Capitalist Alliance, where we quote speeches were given by Solzhenitsyn, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and Professor Sutton, who was a researcher at Hoover Institute, who pointed out that during the Vietnam War, we were financing the Russians, we were financing the North Vietnamese, we were financing the Viet Cong, we're killing our boys in the rice paddies and the villages of South Vietnam.
And conclusive proof has come out already that the Gulf of Tonkin, which was supposedly initiated all this, was a total fabrication. As I understand it, the documents have been released, and that was the information that was given to Congress to give President Johnson carte blanche to do this effort without a declaration of war in Vietnam. Is that correct?
That's right, but the Vietnam War was a no-win war. We didn't go there to win. Who is it who's funding the Vietnamese, the ruthless communist Vietnamese government in Vietnam today? Why, we are. America's World Bank and International Monetary Fund, American corporations, American loans are funding this Vietnamese government that's still holding many of our soldiers, probably between 500 and 1,000 that we abandoned. Of course, the books on that, like Kiss the Boys Goodbye, by Monica Jensen Stevenson, who we've interviewed, those books are actively suppressed in the United States. They were pulled off the shelves of bookstores across America so that Americans wouldn't read them. And when Monica moved up to Canada, got the copyright back and had the book published up there, it was published by a private company. Somebody bought up the company and just accidentally shredded 5,000 copies of her book, Kiss the Boys Goodbye. Why? They don't want the American people to know that we abandoned between 500 and 1,000 of our soldiers there in Vietnam, and a similar number in Laos, and many of them are still there, all these years later, abandoned by the wicked people who control our government. Not that the military would have done that. The military feels very strongly about abandoned soldiers, but many of them realize, of course, the people who controlled the government at that time and still controlled it today, the very wicked people have abandoned those soldiers and have suppressed that information, so the average American will never hear that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. Monteith, I know this scenario in this interview today is just like one our last time. We have so many areas we want to cover, and this is the same information that you have faithfully preached for decades. And sometimes it's hard for me to back up a little bit. Here you have two radio hosts going at it together here. And I need to drop back for our listeners and explain a little bit to them about your show, Radio Liberty, which is a heroic effort that you have been faithfully applying yourself to in service to the Lord for decades. And I'd like for you to explain a little bit about your program. As I understand it, I believe it's syndicated on at least 60 radio stations, and it may be more. Tell us a little bit about the topics that you cover with your show, any kind of details about it, and what you hope to accomplish with it.
Well, basically, Radio Liberty was sort of my dream. I'd always thought when I retired I'd love to do talk radio, but, I mean, how could you ever accomplish something like that? And then, of course, it's amazing how God works, and I really feel God's hand in it. A friend of mine came and said, look, they're going to have some low-powered FM licenses coming on, and would you be willing to put up a couple of $1,000 and go in with me, and we'll get a low-powered license, and we can have a station here in Santa Cruz where we live? And I said, sure, sounds like a good idea.
And when was this, Dr. Monteith?
This has been back in the late 1980s.
Wow.
And so basically we got a license, and then we wanted to put a little studio up someplace in Santa Cruz, and the planning commission wouldn't let us do it. And then we had to get it re-engineered to put in another location, and the planning commission wouldn't let us do it. And then, of course, my friend said, well, why don't we put the studio at your home and put the aerial up on your roof? And I said, oh, well, the planning commission will never let us do that. But the planning commission did let us do that, and suddenly I've got a small, low, 200-watt FM state radio station in my home. My friend, of course, installed everything, put in the studio. I had no idea how to do these things, but he built a station from scratch for us at a fairly inexpensive cost. But when we start doing programs, and when you're doing one program, it's just as easy to do two. Talk to the local radio station in Salinas, and they said, well, we'll let you come on here, drive time for $500 a month, best time of the day. Well, you just couldn't pass that offer up. Of course, that was the come on. Before long, of course, the price went up, but at least we began to develop a base of supporters. And then from there, of course, we got onto some of the major stations in California. Now, these are simply half an hour a week. We have to pay for the time. In one of the stations for half an hour costs us $450, but and that's a week. And of course, for a month, you're talking $1,600. But we reach all of Southern California at noon every Saturday on Cape Wright, which is the second largest Christian station in that great metropolis of Los Angeles. So, and the signal goes all the way from San Diego all the way up to Visalia in the northern part of the valley there. And so what a great outlet. We have similar outlets in Northern California and in Oregon. And then we have a lot of smaller stations in New Mexico and in the Middle West. And we just keep picking up stations. And now a lot of these are just half an hour a week. I think our weekend program goes to 35 or 38 stations for half an hour. And of course, we have our evening program that's on about 11 stations, which includes one internet, one shortwave, and actually it's 12 stations. And then we have our afternoon program. So we have about 60 outlets, including satellite, including shortwave, internet, and then the radio stations. But at least we have a small voice, and we're reaching some people, and they're beginning to understand what's really going on in the world today. So what a great privilege it is to have this outlet and to be able to get information out that people are not going to get elsewhere. And I know these programs are heard throughout the world by the miracle of internet. And hopefully we're bringing some people to the Lord, and we're strengthening the faith of others. So I feel it's a real privilege. I don't take any credit for it myself. God has opened the doors, and believe me, I couldn't have done it by myself. But people can listen to our programs on the internet at radioliberty.com. That's radioliberty.com. They can listen to our afternoon and evening programs on the shortwave. We have shortwave, a very, very powerful program in the evening, although it comes on 11 o'clock your time. And then, of course, we have this satellite availability, 24-hour day feed to satellite, which people can get. And so we have all the means of reaching people. God is just going to have to get them to listen, because I sure can't do it.
Well,
we have a lot of people who are actually passing out flyers and passing out cards and telling other people to listen. And I always tell them that when people start to listen, they're going to think we're crazy, but before long, they're going to be afraid we're not.
Well, I'd just like to say to our regular Future Quake listeners in the Nashville area and around the globe via the internet that I can only deliver about 2.5 hours worth of programming a week. If you want to have additional information that's even broader in scope and information, be sure and catch all of the material that's produced by Dr. Monteith and Radio Liberty, because it dovetails right into the kind of approach that we do here at Future Quake, and we're really fighting the same fight and providing the similar kind of information. But certainly Dr. Monteith has a much wider reach and a broader amount of information he can cover in his time. Dr. Monteith, do you have any kind of reasonably certain feel on these different mediums that you are and all the stations you're at how wide your reach is as far as the number of people that you regularly touch with your programming?
No idea, and we don't have the Arbitron ratings on it, and certainly we just know that we're reaching people, and we hear from them. They call us, we talk to them off the air, and it's just a privilege to have people. They're like members of our family.
Mm-hmm.
We know them, yet we've never met them. We do put on a conference every year, and of course, every year the number of people increases. That would be, of course, in October 26th this year, and if your listeners be interested in coming, you could call our number. That's 1-800-544-8927, 1-800-5-HIV, WAR. And that's the number I used when we were talking specifically about the AIDS epidemic.
That's HIV WAR, is that right?
HIV WAR, 5-HIV WAR. And if they're interested in coming to our annual conference, we've got to bring in speakers from across the country. But it's important that people understand they're not alone in this. There are a lot of people out there who really are concerned, and there is a growing awareness all across America of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
If I can put in a plug, we do have a website. It's called radioliberty.com, and you can go there and you can listen to our radio programs 4 hours a day or 9 hours a day if you on the satellite feed. They can read our newsletters. All of this is free. We have a section on videos, and they can see a lot of the videos we've produced at our meetings. And then we have another section called Other Videos. That's Other Videos, which I think is very important because there you'll actually see the places you can actually log on to YouTube and videos. And you'll actually have an opportunity to hear Aaron Russo, who was a patriot, and he's tells about his interview with one of the members of the Rockefeller family, telling him about their plan to control the world and to chip the people and to control everything, and asking him to join. And of course, he wasn't about to join. He loved America and wasn't going to betray us. And a lot of the clips from Ron Paul talking about what's going on in Washington, D.C. Anyway, people go there, and all you have to do is just scroll down, and if you see a subject you like, you just click on it, and you'll see the video clip of the YouTube clip. And this is so vitally important. Sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Right. Now, Dr. Monteith, is this largely a volunteer effort you or others do for this large scope?
It's a non-profit organization. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to get a tax exemption because we didn't take out a tax-exempt status, but I don't get a salary. My wife works 12 to 14 hours a day. She doesn't get a salary. I do 5 hours of talk radio a day and the rest of the time researching. We do this full-time because this is our ministry, and I believe God's called us to do it, and that's why we're doing it. And of course, I know that you're doing what you do because you want to get the information out.
That's right.
There are more and more people all across the country who are becoming aware of what's going on and getting the people out. It's exciting to see this movement of Christian patriots grow because this is primarily a Christian movement, even though, there are some people, of course, who would be supporting what we say who don't believe what we say, but the vast majority of them are Christians who realize the true nature of this spiritual battle we're engaged in.
Well, I'd just like to point out to our listeners to stop and think for a minute. We've got a gentleman like Dr. Monteith who had an extremely successful medical career, making very, very large sums of money as appropriate for someone of his skill, doing extremely well, and rather than continuing and going into later age, making millions of dollars, he and his family have sacrificed that because of their love for their fellow man, their fellow citizen, their fellow brothers and sisters in the Lord. And they could be taking time, even if they weren't working, going out in a beautiful area there and where they are in Santa Cruz and enjoying that beautiful weather and scenery and playing golf and relaxing and boating and all those kind of things their lifestyle could otherwise afford. But they've chosen instead to spend countless long hours in a studio, tied to a radio program that they're at every day, they don't get relief from, tied to deadlines they have, websites to keep updated, money and cash flow that they need to be able to catch up and keep all the airtime on. That is a major, major sacrifice that they do because they love people like you. And what I ask you in exchange is to consider what he says very, very seriously. If this wasn't information that he, as a very, very learned man of science, did not have convincing evidence of the dire information he has to share with us fellow brothers and sisters, he wouldn't be making this large sacrifice.